All right, guys, we are back, and we were just talking about long-run aggregate supply and macroeconomic equilibrium, and how these concepts kind of relate, and how that generally in the long run, this is sort of the tendency that AD and SRAS overlap with long run, and that we are at productive capacity. However, in the short run, we have fluctuations. The first one that we want to talk about is called a recessionary gap. And basically what happens with a recessionary gap is that if we were to have a recession, let's say for whatever reason AD was up here, okay? AD was up here and it drops to this point of AD. So we have a drop in aggregate demand. Basically, we're going to, have a lower GDP and a lower price level. So prices are dropping, or the average price level is dropping, and output, or real GDP, is dropping. This is a recessionary gap. And if you think about it, if we were to have a drop in aggregate demand, let's say consumers are really worried about the economic future of the country, or whatever reason, we have this big drop in AD, and we're no longer at LRAS, where we're producing our full employment level of output, but less than that. And if you think about it, because we're not demanding as many goods and services that we possibly could produce, we have some unemployment. Not only unemployment of labor because people aren't working, but we also have some unemployment of resources, of capital, of land, of other things, because we're not utilizing all of our resources. So in a way, when we have a recession, we definitely have lower GDP, and we also we're not producing that full output quantity of output, and so we're in a recession. Things are shrinking economically, and things are not going as well. You probably remember when we were doing a business cycle diagram that we kind of have these different peaks and troughs and economic expansions and contractions. You can kind of see in this example, when the economy, after it hits a high point and it starts to contract, we have a decrease in real GDP, right? GDP, if we were looking at this axis, you can see that GDP is going down, right? Well, over here you can see that GDP is lower than it used to be. And so, here when we have a contraction, sometimes we refer to that contraction as a recession. And here we also kind of see how we're making less GDP as well. And so what you would do if you wanted to make it obvious where that recessionary gap was, you would draw a little line from here to here between Y and YF, and that would indicate the recessionary gap. So again, we're not using all of our resources. And the next is called an inflationary gap. And basically this is when we produce beyond our full employment level of output. And so we're using, basically, if AD shifted beyond our long-run aggregate supply level of output, now we are demanding more goods and services from the economy that can be produced. And so, generally we would say that this is called an inflationary gap, and this will usually be short-lived, and we'll kind of explain why a little later, because we can't really produce more than what is, our maximum potential productive capacity indicated by long-run aggregate supply. So usually these, inflationary or, recessionary gaps are kind of short-lived. But if you were to draw a line between YF and Y, this would be the inflationary gap, the level of output beyond full employment, and again, it would be short-lived. So it's important to understand that neoclassical economists, they use these recessionary and inflationary gaps to kind of show that they believe that the economy is sort of self-sustaining, and that there will always be recessions, there will always be inflationary gaps, there will always be these cycles like in the business cycle, and that generally we always move towards full employment. That if there's ever a recession, or if there's ever a period of growth, we're always going to kind of go back to the long run. So basically we're always going to go back to this. There could be changes in the short run, but we tend to always arrive at long run. So let's kind of show you what that looks like and why that is. Why is it that we go to the long run? So here we go. Let's take an example. Let's say, for example, we have a drop in 80 to 82, right? What are we in? You know this. We just talked about it. A recessionary gap. It's also written right up here, right? We have a recessionary gap. Prices, GDP has dropped, and prices or price level has also dropped, meaning that, things are getting cheaper in the economy. Not only goods and services, but also other things like other factors of production like labor and materials. And if you remember anything about short-run aggregate supply, when labor and materials get cheaper, right, then firms are able to make more goods and services at a lower price. And so if that happens, SRAS shifts to the right. So please note that if we have a drop in aggregate demand for whatever reason, maybe there's a decrease in investment, maybe the government's spending less money, whatever reason, if we have a drop in aggregate demand, that's going to make the price of everything cheaper, including wages and resources. When wages and resources decrease in price, this could lead to an increase in short-run aggregate supply as now firms have lower operating costs, and it puts us right back to macroeconomic equilibrium. The same also happens kind of in the other sort of way. If we were at long run, we have an increase in AD, and we go to this point where we have an inflationary gap. We're producing more than the country can possibly produce at full capacity. What ends up happening is, GDP is now higher, but also prices have gone up. So the price level of most goods and services has risen, and now, because of that, one of the things that will happen is as everything is now more expensive, workers in the economy are going to start to demand higher wages. When everything costs more money, they're going to say to their boss, hey, I can't afford everything that I used to be able to afford. I want higher wages. And, same with resources. Resources will also get more expensive as prices are rising. When that happens and, we have to pay higher wages or we have to pay more in resource fees, short-run aggregate supply will shift to the left because, firms have to pay higher wages, then, the short-run aggregate supply will shift to the left, and we will be back at macroeconomic equilibrium. And this is really important because in both of these examples, neoclassicists, and one of the most famous one being this Austrian gentleman named Friedrich Hayek, believed that we need to not intervene in the economy, that the government and the central bank should not be used to intervene. Because for example here, we had, if AD was moved to the right, if the government was trying to stimulate growth and they, use government spending or monetary policy, all that would do is increase prices in the short run, and eventually we go back to long run. So if the government tried to change things, yes, maybe in the short run we could have a little bit of change, but in the long run, we just go back to LRAS. Same with the other example of the recession. If the government tries to manipulate things, neoclassicists would say, well, why are you going to manipulate anything? All it's going to do is going to go back to long-run aggregate supply. If you really want growth, if you really want to see a real increase in real GDP, you need to get long-run aggregate supply to shift. And that is possible. If you can shift, in some cases, AD and then LRAS, or SRAS and then LRAS, or all three, then we could show real economic growth. We are showing that our productive capacity used to be here. However, because we've increased demand and we've increased supply, eventually what will happen is if AD shifts here and SRAS shifts here, then long run will follow that, this could be possible. So again, these neoclassical economists would say that generally they would advocate for less government intervention and monetary policy intervention and more to advocate for the improvement in the productive capacity. And we ought to talk real quick about how to do that. How can we actually get a higher productive capacity? How can we produce more goods and services? How can we shift all three curves? Well, or at least two of the three. And one of that is increased efficiency and technology. When we improve efficiency and technology, this usually leads to higher output at lower costs. And this could lead to not only short-run aggregate supply shifting to the right, but also long-run, as we're able to produce more overall. We've got a greater productive capacity. Another one that we could do is we could change the natural rate of unemployment. We haven't learned about unemployment yet. It's actually in our next unit, but we will. But please note that if we could lower that, if we could lower the natural rate of unemployment, this could also lead us to being more productive, right? Or our productive capacity being greater. Finally, and this is probably the most important, if we could improve either the quality or the quantity of the factors of production. For example, if we improve education, that would be improving the quality of our human capital, or maybe the quality of our labor. If we improve the quality by creating a more educated workforce, this could lead to more productivity in the long run. So that would be an example of a way I'm taking a factor of production and I'm improving the quality or the quantity. Another example might be, same with labor again. We could take another example, and instead of increasing the quality, we could improve the quantity. If we were able to get more workers, if the population was growing, and we have more labor, it could be that greater amount of labor could lead to a greater productive capacity as well, and also shift long-run aggregate supply. And we'll kind of go over that in class. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stop there for now, and the next video lesson will be on the Keynesian perspective, on John Maynard Keynes, world-famous economist. He didn't believe in all this neoclassical mumbo-jumbo. He said he's got a different idea, and we're going to go over that in the next lesson. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be right back.